The GPS signal flickered twice before settling on a narrow dirt road deep in rural Montana. The sun was dipping low, brushing gold over the empty fields as the horse trailer rumbled forward. Behind the wheel, Frank Miles frowned at the delivery papers on his passenger seat. He had delivered horses for 20 years, and something about this address felt wrong. The paper said Meadowbrook Ranch, a high-end equestrian facility known for trainers who wore polished boots and handled million-dollar bloodlines. But the road leading ahead looked like it belonged to a forgotten corner of the world. When the last turn opened into a clearing, Frank knew something was off. A small wooden sign hung crooked on two nails. Meadowbrook Healing Stables. A handful of paddocks spread across dry grass. A weather-worn barn stood with patches of old paint. And in the distance, an elderly woman, in mud-stained overalls, was leading a miniature pony that looked older than she was. "You've got to be kidding me," Frank muttered as he parked beside the barn. The woman walked over, her boots sinking into soft dirt. Her gray hair was tied back, her glasses slipping down her nose. She looked friendly but confused. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked. "I've got a delivery for Meadowbrook Ranch," Frank said, waving the papers. "One gelding. Name's Midnight's Verdict. Premium show jumper. Worth $200,000 according to these documents." The woman blinked hard. "Son, you're in the wrong place. This here is Meadowbrook Healing Stables. We work with special needs children. The fancy place you're looking for is probably Meadowbrook Estates, 40 miles north." Frank didn't want to hear it. His boss had ordered him to finish the delivery before nightfall, and his truck's transmission had begun rattling like a coffee can full of nails. "Look, ma'am, my paperwork says this is the address, and I'm already behind schedule. Once I unload him, the problem is yours to fix." Before she could argue, Frank opened the trailer. The woman, Dorothy Mallister, age 71, took one step back as the horse inside stepped into the fading light. Midnight's Verdict stood tall and dark, his black coat shining like polished stone. He was built like a champion, every muscle shaped by years of training. But Dorothy didn't stare at his size or beauty. She stared at his eyes. They were empty, hollow, as if life had drained out of him long ago. Sweet mercy, she thought. This horse wasn't wild or fiery like a show jumper. He looked defeated. His head hung low. His ears barely moved. Dorothy spotted old marks on his mouth where a harsh bit had rubbed the skin raw. She had seen broken horses before, but never one like this. Frank handed her a thick envelope. "All the paperwork's in here. Good luck, lady. You'll need it." Then he drove away, leaving a cloud of dust drifting over the field. Dorothy stood alone with the magnificent horse nobody wanted. Inside the envelope, rejection notes filled the pages. Returned by buyer number 1. Refuses to jump. Returned by buyer number 2. Unpredictable behavior. Returned by buyer number 3. Dangerous for competitive riding. And one trainer had written only 4 words. "Beautiful horse, broken spirit." Dorothy touched the paddock fence. "Well now," she whispered, "seems like both of us got handed something unexpected today." Midnight's Verdict didn't react. He just stared at nothing. The next morning, Dorothy's granddaughter Olivia arrived to help with the therapy program. The moment she saw the giant black warm blood, she froze. "Grandma, that's a show horse." "That's Midnight's Verdict," Dorothy said. "Delivered here by mistake. Worth more than the whole property." Olivia scanned the paperwork with trained eyes. "Grandma, look at these notes. This horse isn't dangerous. He's traumatized." Her voice softened. "He shows signs of learned helplessness. They pushed him too hard, probably too young. He shut down to survive." Dorothy had known it in her gut. Olivia confirmed it with her training. By afternoon, the truth came out. The real Meadowbrook facility hadn't even ordered him. Midnight's Verdict was supposed to go to a private buyer in California, but that buyer had filed bankruptcy. The horse's owner, a billionaire investor named Sterling Moore, was overseas and unreachable. "So basically," Olivia said after several calls, "nobody knows where he's supposed to go, and nobody wants to deal with him right now." Dorothy nodded slowly. Then he stays here until someone figures it out. That evening, everything changed. Wesley, a 9-year-old boy with autism, slipped away from his normal routine. Without a sound, he walked straight toward Midnight's Verdict's paddock. Before Dorothy could stop him, the boy climbed through the fence. Dorothy's heart nearly stopped. A horse this size could injure a grown man easily, let alone a child. But when she reached the fence, she froze. Midnight's Verdict had lowered his huge head until it touched the boy's forehead. Wesley lifted one small hand and placed it gently on the horse's nose. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They simply understood each other. 5 silent minutes passed. Then Wesley whispered, in a voice far clearer than usual, "You're sad." "I'm sad sometimes too, but it's okay here." Dorothy felt her breath catch. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since his arrival, Midnight's Verdict's eyes weren't empty. Something flickered, something returning, something waking. Dorothy knew in that moment. This horse didn't arrive by accident. Something bigger was at work. By the next morning, Dorothy couldn't stop thinking about what she had witnessed. Midnight's Verdict had shown no life, no spark, no interest in anything. Until Wesley touched him, she kept replaying the moment in her mind. The stillness, the connection, the way the horse had lowered his head, as if he understood the boy's heart. Something inside Dorothy whispered that this was only the beginning. 3 days later, a call finally came. Not from the horse's owner, but from his assistant, Patricia, whose voice sounded tired and rushed. "Mr. Moore says, if you want to keep the horse temporarily, that's fine. He's deciding whether to sell him or send him to a retirement farm. All expenses are covered through a trust. Just keep him safe until he returns from Asia." Olivia raised an eyebrow when Dorothy hung up. "So we're babysitting a $200,000 horse?" Dorothy shook her head. "No, we've been given a chance to help a soul that everyone else gave up on." But healing would not be quick. Midnight's Verdict spent the first week standing alone, disconnected from the world. He ate because he had to. He followed Dorothy when she fed him, but without interest. His ears barely moved. His steps were slow. Dorothy didn't ask anything from him. She didn't push him. She just sat outside his stall each morning, talking softly about life, loss, and hope. "You know, I lost my husband 15 years ago," she told him one morning. "I almost sold this place. People told me to retire, take it easy. But healing doesn't come from quitting. It comes from holding on long enough to feel the sun again. Maybe you forgot how that feels." The horse didn't respond, but he listened. The breakthrough came during the second week when Wesley returned for therapy. The boy walked straight toward the paddock and sat in the grass with his notebook. He didn't climb inside this time. He simply drew and talked softly, telling the horse about his day. Slowly, very slowly, Midnight's Verdict walked closer. He stopped just a few feet away, lowering his head as if curious. Wesley didn't reach out. He didn't pressure him. He just kept drawing, humming quietly. After nearly an hour, the horse stepped over the boy's drawings, standing beside him like a living shadow. "He likes you," Wesley said without looking up. "He likes it here." Dorothy felt something swell in her chest. It was small, fragile but real, hope. As the days passed, other children asked to meet the horse. Dorothy allowed it under strict rules. No sudden movements, no loud noises, always supervised. A girl with cerebral palsy sat beside him and read from her favorite book. A teenage boy with anxiety brushed his mane in calm silence. A boy with Down syndrome laughed as the horse tried to touch colored cones with his nose. None of this was traditional training. There were no commands, no pressure, just connection, just presence, just healing. Olivia documented everything: behaviors, reactions, patterns. She watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Grandma, this is incredible. He's interacting with these kids better than he ever did with professional trainers." Dorothy touched the paddock rail, smiling softly. "That's because the kids aren't asking him to perform. They're asking him to be their friend." On the morning of the 28th day, Dorothy approached the barn and stopped in her tracks. Midnight's Verdict was playing. truly playing. He tossed his head, reared lightly, trotted in circles like a horse waking from a long sleep. When he saw Dorothy, he trotted to the fence and nudged her shoulder, his eyes bright for the first time. "Well, good morning," she whispered through rising tears. "Welcome back, beautiful boy." That afternoon, the phone rang again. This time, it was Sterling Moore himself. "Ms. Mallister," he said, his voice sharp and businesslike. "I'm sending a trailer next week. I found a retirement farm in Virginia that will take him." Dorothy closed her eyes, her heart squeezed. "Mr. Moore," she said gently, "before you decide, please come visit. Please see what he's become. Midnight's verdict has found something here I don't think he's ever had before." There was a long silence. Finally, Moore sighed. "One visit. Then he leaves." 5 days later, a sleek black Mercedes rolled up the dirt road. Sterling Moore stepped out wearing a pressed shirt and polished shoes that looked out of place in the dusty yard. He took in the humble property with a skeptical gaze. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to see here," he said. Dorothy didn't explain. She simply led him to the arena. 6 children moved around the arena in a playful pattern. Some walked. Some laughed. Some focused carefully on small tasks. And in the center of them all was Midnight's verdict. No saddle, no bridle. Just a halter and a calmness that radiated from him like sunrise. Moore watched as the horse followed the children, stepped through obstacle courses, touched cones with his nose, and stood perfectly still while a girl stretched beneath him. When Wesley dropped a ball, Midnight's verdict gently picked it up and set it at the boy's feet. Moore's eyes widened. "That's impossible," he whispered. "He wouldn't even walk straight on a lead rope when I bought him." Dorothy looked at him gently. "That's because everyone tried to make him something he wasn't. These children don't want a champion. They just want a friend." Moore swallowed hard, staring at the horse with new eyes. After the session, he asked to see Midnight's verdict alone. Dorothy watched from outside the paddock as the businessman approached cautiously. The horse stood still, studying him. Then, with quiet grace, Midnight's verdict stepped forward and rested his forehead against Moore's chest. The man froze. His breath broke. Something inside him cracked open. 10 minutes later, Moore walked out of the paddock with dirt on his shirt and emotion in his eyes. "Ms. Mallister," he said softly, "if I were to donate the horse to your program, could you care for him long term?" Dorothy blinked. "Sir, we barely scrape by as it is." "What if I set up a trust?" Moore said. "Enough to cover all his expenses. Enough to support your program as well." Dorothy felt her knees weaken. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Moore looked back at the horse now standing with Wesley. "Because I finally understand his purpose." The paperwork took nearly 3 weeks to complete, but when it was done, Midnight's verdict officially belonged to Meadowbrook Healing Stables. The trust that Sterling Moore established covered everything the horse would ever need. Feed, farrier work, veterinary care, and even added $50,000 a year to help keep the small therapy center running. But what mattered most wasn't the money. It was watching the horse who had once been rejected, again and again, now step into a purpose that fit him better than any show ring ever could. As fall settled across Montana, Midnight's verdict became the quiet heartbeat of the therapy program. Children who struggled to communicate found comfort in brushing his coat. Kids who feared animals learned courage by standing beside him. Teens who carried heavy emotions felt safe enough to talk when he stood quietly near them. With each new child, the horse seemed to understand exactly what they needed. Wesley, the boy who first reached him, changed the most. He began speaking more, smiling more, participating more. His teachers reported improvements at school. His mother said he slept better and stopped having night terrors. One evening she hugged Dorothy with tears running down her cheeks. "He finally feels safe," she whispered. "He says he feels safe because of the sad horse, who isn't sad anymore." The transformation rippled outward. The girl with cerebral palsy stood taller and read with more confidence in each session. The anxious teenager learned to control his breathing by matching it with the horse's slow, steady breaths. The boy with Down syndrome taught Midnight's Verdict a new game involving colored cones and applause. It didn't matter that Midnight's Verdict could no longer jump fences or compete for ribbons. What he was doing now meant more than any trophy. Olivia watched everything through a professional lens, documenting each child's progress. "Grandma," she said one afternoon, "this horse is doing work I've never seen before. He's reading emotions, adjusting his behavior, connecting to kids in ways therapy animals usually take years to learn." Dorothy leaned on the fence, smiling softly as Midnight's Verdict lowered his head so a shy girl could touch his face. "He's not performing," Dorothy said. "He's healing. That's what he was meant to do." When winter snow painted the ranch white, Sterling Moore returned for another visit. This time, he didn't wear polished shoes. He brought his teenage daughter, who had been struggling quietly with depression since her parents' divorce. She spent almost 2 hours inside the paddock with the horse, running her hands through his mane, whispering things she hadn't shared with her father. When she walked out, her eyes weren't dark anymore. She hugged her father, something she hadn't done in months. Moore wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. "Ms. Mallister," he said quietly, "I bought that horse hoping he'd bring me wins. Instead, he brought something I didn't even know I needed." Dorothy smiled. "Sometimes blessings don't come wrapped the way we expect." Quote, "Snow melted, spring arrived, and the story of Midnight's Verdict, once labeled broken and worthless, spread across the community. Trainers called, reporters came, other therapy centers visited to learn what Dorothy and her granddaughter had done. But Dorothy always gave the same answer. "We didn't fix him. We just listened." One cool April evening, Dorothy stood with Olivia near the paddock fence. They watched Wesley setting up a new game of colored buckets, while Midnight's Verdict patiently waited for instructions that only the boy seemed to understand. "You know the beautiful thing?" Dorothy said softly. Olivia looked at her. "What's that, Grandma?" "Everyone thought he was delivered to the wrong farm. But look at him now." Dorothy's voice trembled with emotion. "This wasn't a mistake. He ended up exactly where he was meant to be." Midnight's Verdict nudged Wesley gently, and the boy laughed, a pure, bright sound that carried across the field. Dorothy wiped a tear. Sometimes the wrong address turns out to be the rightest place in the world. Quote, "The horse who had once stood hollow and lifeless now walked with purpose. He had found his calling, not as a champion jumper, not as a showpiece, but as a healer, a guide. A gentle friend who brought light back into broken hearts. A horse once rejected had become the reason dozens of children woke each morning with hope." In the end, Midnight's Verdict didn't just find a home. He found his purpose. And everyone who knew him understood one simple truth. Some miracles begin exactly where mistakes are made.